with Bob Hill and Deputy Mike Higgins, and we're talking about what is called the Curtis Warren case. But as I'm very concerned, it's not about Curtis Warren any more than any of the other 5 others who were prosecuted, found guilty and sent to jail. Are you quite happy, Bob, that these people have had justice?
Well, they've been through the system, and it has been argued whether in fact was the evidence given by the police valid. And they've had a considerable amount of argument, and it's come out in favour that the evidence, irrespective of how it was obtained, was valid, and as a result the 4 or the 5 people along with Warren have been found guilty and have been imprisoned. You
may not have seen it, but Jonathan Walsh, who's still in prison in at Lemoy, wrote quite a strong letter in the JEP the other night complaining about his treatment in this case. Have you seen any of that?
No, he hasn't been in touch with me as far as
He hasn't been in touch. Have any of the prosecuted persons been in touch?
No, in fact, no one's been in touch. But I've worked, my blogs have been as a result of information received which has been valid, either by written statements, judgments, and of course questions in the House.
How about you, Deputy? A couple of the guys were Obst and Hellier initially. I don't know if they're still Obst and Hellier. Have they been in touch?
I've had no contact with any of the people who were prosecuted and convicted in the case.
At that level of the case, I mean, there are all sorts of other aspects of the case now on. Do you have any concerns that people might have been punished for something that wasn't warranted the sort of punishment they got?
I've not seen any evidence at all at the moment that suggests that. I've got lots of questions about subsequent things which could have an impact on that, but I don't know.
The case is always referred to as the Curtis Warren case. And that's obviously there was a conspiracy, that's what they've all been found guilty of. But he was the big fish. He was the big bad boy from Liverpool. And obviously the system wanted to get him and lock him away, and they did. It could be construed that the other ones were lesser criminals and got caught in the net, more by chance or bad luck or whatever reason, but they were part of it. But you think on that basis they might have suffered an injustice?
Well, the point is, if they were part of a conspiracy, the same as if they'd been involved in the actual attempt to import the goods, they would have all been found equally guilty.
Yeah, I've got to go along with that as well.
Are you both happy because it's a conspiracy to do something which was never in fact done? I mean, I know just conspiring to do something is sufficient on itself, but this was a conspiracy to import a quantity of drugs into Jersey. The person on the end of the famous telephone in Holland, the Moroccan guy, has never appeared in Jersey. He was never prosecuted. He was part of the conspiracy. Have you had any knowledge about him? Does that concern you at all?
Well, I've had no knowledge, and I don't know whether he was arrested in Europe or anything else. In fact, I've not heard anything about that.
How about Bob? Have you any knowledge?
No, again. All we have actually are these number of people who were part of the conspiracy, and I think we've got to look at the guys at the lower end. They must have known that they were involving themselves with a Mr. Big, and as a result of that they are obviously being given a prison sentence in line with what they were going to do. And the value, I think the questions could be asked, what really was the value of that cannabis? Because it's been said it's around £1 million. Obviously, the greater the crime, the likelihood is that the greater will be your punishment if you're caught.
I think it was the Sun newspaper, it might have been the late News of the World, but they used to have a mysterious character called the Sheikh, and he used to go around setting people up for interviews. Now this guy in Holland is a Moroccan, he's not a sheikh. But suppose he was the sheikh from the News of the World or the Sun newspaper, and he was setting this thing up, and could it be, because he's never appeared anywhere, nobody knows the truth of what he was setting up. We've never heard what he was actually trying to do, as far as I know. Suppose he did set these people up for a conspiracy that didn't exist. Would we know any better? Would anybody know that not to be true?
No, again, having read the judgments, the Royal Court judgment, Privy Council, there's no mention of this Mr. X from wherever. Because
what lies at the heart of the whole problem now is the bugged telephone conversation, and that conversation was with this mysterious Moroccan. Now, if it was illegal or whether it was not illegal bugging that took place, you'd have thought the other end of the conversation was quite important, wouldn't you?
Well, it certainly would be, but again, I think the questions you're asking us need to be directed towards the police and the authorities here about what happened to that individual. Did they track him down? Was he arrested by other authorities? Or what? We just don't know.
Yeah.
You're still pursuing lines of inquiry about these various aspects, especially about the bugging, the status of the bugging, the role of the police, and who are now being exonerated and told that they should be rewarded with commendations for their part in the bugging. Are you happy with that view of it?
Well, from my own point of view, I wanted to know what the truth is all the way through. And we've been looking at evidence here, there and everywhere. I don't think we've got all the answers yet.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think there's got to be more openness on the part of the Jersey Police and the Law Officers Department.
Yeah, I think it's very important also when one reads about the involvement of the Hampshire Police in the inquiry. They were asked to carry out an investigation. It's now apparent that they were hampered in the investigation. Now, was part of that investigation down to finding out what happened to Mr. the Sheikh from wherever? But I would have thought what Hampshire Police were trying to do was the validity of the officers. Did they act in a reasonable manner? Were they acting lawfully? And of course that then brings up to the other big fish. The other question is the advocate and Mackay and the evidence he gave to the Hampshire. Did he give it to Hampshire?
It was, no, I believe he gave it to the disciplinary hearing. I don't know.
Yeah.
The policeman locally, now the disciplinary hearing, which was handled, so we're told, correctly, secretly, the public wasn't supposed to know, that now the findings have been leaked and they've been available on the Voice blog. That procedure itself has raised lots of questions in the public. Is that an acceptable procedure, do you think?
I've got to say again, having had experience being a police officer, it is customary that any discipline hearing, and that would be the same whether you were in education or any other department, that normally they're internal matters, they're dealt with internally. I think where we've got on this particular case is because, again, we're back talking about warrant. We're also talking about, I think, an injustice also for the police officers. They were carrying out their job, they're doing their job to the best of their ability. They felt that was the best thing they had to do at the time. And if they hadn't arrested them, what would have happened? They would have let these people go. So there's a lot of questions that need to be asked, a lot of answers that have been given. One's even got to go back and question those because, again, it's not.
Well, we hope that police officers or anybody else, whether they're doctors, they're behaving properly, ethically. And we hope that police officers, in gathering information, evidence, do so within the law. Now, obviously, one of the undercurrents about this case is that the key evidence, this conversation about the bugging of the guy in Holland and presumably Curtis Warren or whoever was speaking to him, that the hint was that was illegally obtained because under French law, Belgian law. It's now being said that it wasn't illegally obtained, but if it was illegally obtained, does that set a precedent for other surveillance operations? I mean, does that apply to everybody now?
Well, that's been challenged, first of all, obviously, in a number of the courts. So the Privy Council also heard the appeal, and they felt that the evidence was safe to accept. Now, Curtis Warren himself is supposed to be appealing to the European Court of Human Rights, but the information that I've seen suggests that it would be accepted, but until the court rules, we wouldn't know.
Yeah, this is, again, this is what they call case law, and I think now we've moved up another bar. That the fact is now the courts are going to accept evidence which is obtained, as indeed with this case. So one would assume now in future, if the police officers, some other police force, carry out the same operation, and they come forward saying, look, we weren't allowed to bug, but we did. And this is the information we got. And
but these are operational matters about policing. They could be about provision of health services. The public has got to be somehow reassured that these things are being done properly. And at some point, they're going to have it explained in quite detail that a bugging procedure, if it was carried out, was done legally. The public are going to have to know the operational methods, aren't they?
No, I agree with that. But there is conflicting case law, which the European Court has looked at. In this particular case, the information, or some of the opinions I've seen, suggest that it was legal, and so. But we need to get further answers on this. It's a very fluid.
Jersey does have a commissioner who's supposed to report every 12 months, I believe, on bugging. Has he made any statements on this aspect?
Well, one's got to go back to the report that was produced every year, and this is one of the criticisms I levelled in one of my blogs. The fact that the Commissioner didn't raise the issue until way after, maybe 3 or 4 years. And again, was there a conspiracy there? It was conveniently dropped And these are the mysteries that go on behind closed doors.
Jersey still doesn't have a police authority. That's another omission which other people might have access to discover the truth of issues like this.
It also doesn't have a body to have oversight of human rights. So there are a number of omissions or weaknesses in our judicial system.
See, simple guys like me, we like to find the good guys and the bad guys. Now, with policemen, generally, there's somebody comes, it depends what your political leanings are sometimes, but when this case started, it was Graham Power who was the chief of police, and he saw this case through up to the point when they'd been arrested, and I don't know how much he was involved after that, but he was certainly involved in all that stage of the case. So he should have known what was going on, presumably, as the senior officer. It's only a small force, just over 200 officers. Something as big as this, something as big as Curtis Warren, this great demon from Liverpool, he would have known everything that went on, surely.
Yeah, but again, you've got to remember that the police officers had made the decision to arrest that man. And once the person or the gang was arrested, the matter then goes to our Attorney General, our law officers. They are the ones who decide to prosecute. And the decision was taken that it was because the evidence was probably in the public interest that, for the want of a better word, as expression was, they gave it a run. And it went to court. And then, quite rightly, before the case actually started, the lawyers and the judge, etc., they all started debating was whether the evidence would be valid. And the decision was taken that that evidence should be used. So really, once it got on the road, the police officers' part of it was non-existent. They just had to give evidence.
The fact that they had bugged the car in the appropriate way was disclosed to the defence.
Yeah.
And obviously they've used that as part of their arguments to the various courts and the different appeals. Now, we won't know the end result probably until it actually goes to the European Court in Strasbourg.
But we have to, I mean, these elements have been raised. There are loads of uncertainties. We don't know precisely what's happened. Why should we have to rely upon Curtis Warren or somebody else to take the Court of Human Rights before we can find out? Surely there ought to be a local procedure for us, Joe Public, to find out what's happened, isn't there?
Well, I must say that I do find it frustrating, the fact that very often we'll ask questions in the States and we'll get answers, or we think we're getting answers, but really there's an awful lot of semantics being played. And sometimes I do wonder whether we are getting the correct information. So there are problems obtaining information about what really went on.
Le Marcon, the Minister for Home Affairs, is saying quite a lot, but he's coming over as rather an ill-informed, weak person in my perception. I don't want to be unkind to the guy, he's a nice enough guy, but this is the difficulty of Jersey, isn't it? We have this, you're friends with people, you like these people, but when it comes to the crunch, if they're not telling you the whole story in the States or outside of the States, what do you do about it?
This is the sad thing apart that I find now, that we've had all this experience with the Graham Power issue, and we're told that lessons have been learned, and they haven't. And what we have here, another opportunity, and we're going to have a committee of inquiry with the historic abuse.
And you're a policeman, you've been a policeman for a long time in the UK. These are very highly trained senior policemen. Yeah. If they can't follow procedures properly, and I don't know what level they're not following procedures, I'm not saying I don't know who isn't following the procedure, but somebody doesn't appear to be following procedures.
No, let's be fair here. The officers had the bugging taken part in Jersey, they had authority. Now, they know someone's going to commit a crime, or there's plans to commit a crime. What do the officers do? They know that if the case was in Jersey, they could bug. They went to France and they bugged. And then, having got that evidence, they then arrested the guys, brought them to Jersey. Then it was down to the other authorities now whether to accept that evidence. And that's the way the law works. There is a law that says you can't do something or you can do something. However, it's tested. And what now the benchmark has been raised, they're saying that providing the officers have bugged the car, and they put their hands up and they admit it, that they've done it, and they say, look, unless we had bugged the car, we wouldn't have got the evidence. It was then for the courts themselves to decide whether they'll accept it. And now it would appear that as a result of the Privy Council's judgment, that in future, police officers may well be able to bug cars when they shouldn't. And that could be a frightening thing. At the same time,
all sorts of other activities.
Let a criminal get away when you know you have we now have mechanisms whereby one can use.
Because obviously vaguely similar complaints have been raised by people like ex-Senator Stuart Sivray, the raid on his home, his property, the search warrant that was used there. It has rather similar overtones, doesn't it, about heavy-handed policing?
Well, I certainly am not happy about that particular situation, because an arrest warrant, a search warrant, was actually sort of issued, which was invalid, and then the police used the ordinary police procedures and criminal evidence law, and arrested him outside the property and then gained access to the property. I have certain great reservations about that aspect of that particular case.
I think whilst they're related, and interesting, also related to one of the same police officers, I think they are, although they're related, they're different. And I'm more worried about what went on with the Stuart Sivray, where again that was really, to my mind, they knew what the bounds were. It wasn't like we had got someone having to make an instant decision. They had time, they arranged for it all, they drove down with 6 or 7 police officers. It was a proper operation. They knew what their powers were. With the other instance, this was a moving situation.
But even in this drug case, the so-called Curtis Warren case, they did have time to set it all up. They did have time to get themselves to France. I mean, that you say about getting the evidence, but obviously Joe Public like myself, we wonder they didn't have the evidence, so the evidence they needed was a bugged conversation. That's a rather curious way about going about getting the evidence, isn't it?
No, surveillance and bugging is used by the security services all the time to catch terrorists, for example, and serious criminals. So, again, I have no problem with the use of this material, providing it's properly authorised and done properly.
And also, there was a moving feast. We have here that they anticipated this operation was going to hang out in Jersey. That's why they got the permission. Then they found out it was going to change it.
When the case did start here and it was held, you would have thought they had a bunch of terrorists. The amount of police surveillance that was going on around town, roads closed, armed policemen on every roof around the Royal Square, and it was you would have thought it was Hamas had arrived. Do you not think that indicates a rather OTT police force?
Difficult to say. Whether they had evidence that someone might try to free him, who knows?
Well, evidence from the bug telephone call, perhaps, yes.
We had the answers given was that particular operation cost 700,000. They said it was £1 million, £300,000 to carry out the arrest, and £700,000 to keep security. I just wonder where these figures come from, but at the same time, one could say that at least no one attempted, because of the amount of... unfortunately, of course, it leads on to something else, because the number of times the police were carried arms were then used for justification for having taser guns.
Taser guns, indeed. Deputy, you've got some more questions coming up, I believe, in the States on this general issue.
That's right, yes.
What particular aspects are you looking at?
I don't say too much at the moment, but basically some of them relate, obviously, to the judgment that has been put on voice of the disciplinary hearing. There's certainly questions from that demand answers, and I don't believe that we've had the answers. Some new information has also come to light, which I will be asking questions on that as well, but I don't want to say at this point.
Do you think the bad guys are locked up, or do you think the bad guys are still running the show in Jersey?
I have to say that the conviction of the people involved in the drugs case stands until it's overturned. As far as what's going on locally, I do have concerns. I wouldn't say bad guys or anything like that, but I do want answers to the questions that I have.
I would have thought you need clarification of some of the questions you may have, or the answers you were given to questions you posed
that too.
Last time. It might be useful.
Just very finally, Haute Garenne's been going on for years and years and years. We never seem to get to a final conclusion. The inquiry is still being discussed. Is this so-called case, this Curtis Warren case, is this going to go on for years and years and years?
I wouldn't have thought so. It depends on how quickly Warren can get himself off to...
And the other 5?
Well, yes, but again, how far are they pursuing it? I don't know. It's not about...
It raises, so every question raises more questions. If Curtis Warren should be successful at Strasbourg, do all their convictions fall?
Yes, I think they would. Yeah. If the evidence was deemed inadmissible, then all of them would be freed as well.
We better leave it there. Thanks very much indeed.